Equal day and night, they anchor the year. It just follows that Genesis 1 pattern that we just discussed. Order must reflect creation, period. If order doesn't reflect creation, then there's a problem. So, day 3, it's a separation in order. That's what happened on day 3, because there was division of night and day. But then in day 4, that's when the lights were placed. So when equal day and equal night occur on day 3, the year begins on day 4. So when on day 3 and equal night, equal day, when it occurs, that ends the 364-day cycle. And then the next day is the new year, Yahawah's year. And that pattern is preserved throughout time. It's never changed. Never changed. So we don't have to have a leap year and, et cetera. But none of that comes into play because his pattern hasn't changed since day 4 of creation. Now, how powerful is that? Tremendously. And that's the whole anchor of the 364-day. It's just Ahbayaba or Ahbayab, using all the complete letters. It begins at sunrise, month 1, day 1. And it begins on day 4 of the week, matching the creation order. And that pattern never changes, period. So again, what is this Ahbayaba? It's agricultural. It has to do with agriculture. It's not pagan. In Exodus 13:4, it says, "Today you are going out in the new month, Ahbayaba." In the new month, Ahbayaba. This is when you go out. And Deuteronomy 16:1 says, "Observe the month of Ahbayaba." And this is what it says, and just the full reading of Deuteronomy 16:1. "Guard the new month, Ahbayaba, and perform the Pasach of Yahawah, your Elohim. For in the new month of Ahbayaba, Yahawah, your Elohim, brought you out of Mitzrayim by night." So out of Egypt by night. So this is the celebration of Pasach. This is the observance of Pasach. Pasach is Passover. So, and when we look at this Ahbayaba, what the word actually describes is ripened grain. That's what it stands for, ripened grain. So this is where redemption begins in the harvest season. And this is covenant agriculture, not astrology. There's a difference. And so this is the pattern that we've seen since the Exodus from Egypt. That's the purpose of celebrating, observing this particular feast. And we're going to get into these in more detail, all these feasts, but just want to give a little bit of overview for each one of these spring feasts. Observe, what are the appointed times? Well, when we look at this, Leviticus 23:2, like we read earlier, I think we read it earlier. These are my Mawaidayama. These are my appointed times. They belong to Yahawah. They're set, they're ordered, they're covenant rehearsals. So this is what they're not. They're not holidays. They're not traditions. They're not emotional gatherings. They are divine appointments. So what are they again? Well, let's look at each one of these briefly and as they relate to the spring feast. Because, and we're not going to go into detail with all of these, but we want to look at each one just briefly. So Pasach, we find that in Leviticus. They're all found in Leviticus 23. But in Leviticus 23:5 says on the 14th day of the month, 14th day of month 1, that's when we observe this. Exodus 12 tells us that it's a lamb without blemish. And so it is, they placed blood on the doorpost. There was deliverance required as it relates to obedience. And then, because if they weren't obedient, they would not be delivered. And you guys know the story. If they didn't put blood above their doorpost, they perished. So that was period. And it didn't matter. They didn't have to be Yasharal. Anyone who put blood above their doorpost, they were spared. That's something that's very key, because it goes along with following Yahawah's teaching, following Yahawah's laws, following Yahawah's covenant. Anyone who does, you're welcome. But it requires following him. So it's essentially it's a foundation of redemption. That's what Pasach is. And then Matazah is unleavened bread. That's what the world calls it. And we see that celebrated on the 15th through the 21st day of the month 1. And Leviticus 23:6-8, 6 days or 7 days of unleavened bread. And then there's an 8th day of gathering. That's also part of that. And the whole idea is Exodus 12:15 is to remove leaven. And then there's also another part of that in Leviticus 23:14, where we don't eat new grain until first fruits. And that was also be part of what we dive into and go deeper. But this is all about purification. Leaven represents corruption. That's the reason why it's removed. And the removal prepares for the harvest. Then Paryam Raashwan. And again, the world calls this first fruits. But Leviticus 23:10-11, it tells us something very specific about this one. This is the only one that doesn't have a fixed date. It doesn't have a date that's referred to or celebrated on a particular month and day. What it says to do is the morrow after the Shabbat. And the morrow after the Shabbat is during Matazah. It's not fixed on the Gregorian calendar. It's not a fixed Gregorian calendar date. It's tied to the weekly Shabbat during Matazah. Why is that? And this is what I find interesting, because restoration requires participation. It goes beyond just knowing. It actually requires participation. So what is this participation? The people are required to count. They are required to count. We'll see this in just a moment. And it begins this expectation that Yahawah has on his people. They have to count. They physically have to count. This is not something that they look at a particular month, day. They have to actually do some counting. They have to participate. So this is how we know that. Shabawai, or Pentecost. And we are required to count 7 complete Shabbats after first fruits. And so again, why count? Covenant requires engagement. We have to participate. It's more than just knowing about it. He's expecting us to participate. So 7 complete cycles, which is essentially 7 weeks. You have, so 7 times 7 is 49. And then the next day is the 50th day. And that's what Shabawai stands for, is 50. That's the day is celebrated. So he's looking for us to count the days. In Exodus 19, Covenant is established in the third month. Guess when Shabawai takes place? It's in the third month. Man, all this stuff just aligns. And this is essentially, you can say this is where the harvest and the covenant converge together, is on Shabawai. This third month within the Enochian calendar. So it's not something that's automated or anything like that. It's actually, there's a physical counting that needs to take place. And so, these unauthorized days, we talked about these last week: Ash Wednesday, Lent, Ramadan, Christmas, Easter. They're just not authorized by the Most High. They're not found in Torah. They don't align with Mawaidayama. They don't align with that. They don't align with the actual appointed times. You can't find them in the scripture. They're all created by man. And they're all being celebrated right now. Well, Christmas is not. They're pointing toward Easter and all that. But they get this is a time of calendar confusion, because these particular days are being celebrated right now. Lent is in process right now. Ramadan in process right now. So yeah, those are man-made creations. I want to share this, is that what was read earlier in Deuteronomy 12, do not add. Yeah, can't add. The danger of mixture. You guys have seen this before. Ink being dropped into water. I'm sure you guys have seen this at some point in your life. And what happens? This image here gives you an idea of what begins to happen when you dump ink into, or you pour a little bit of ink into water. But what happens to this image eventually? When the ink hits the water, you know how it starts to do something. So what do you guys think about this look and what this actually means?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's eventually the whole water is changed. The color of the whole water changes, and to me that is symbolic of once you mix and once it spreads, it never looks the same. It never is back to the original. So you can't mix. You can't afford to mix, and this is emphasized by people that have allowed this mixing, or maybe not, they grew up in it. They didn't know any different. It's so hard to have them see that this has been mixed, that this is not what it used to look like, that, there was actually pure water with this whole, calendar time, all of it.
Yeah.
So I just see it brings me back to that Deuteronomy verse, because I see how it's an abomination now, because once you mix and once it spreads, it never looks the same. And Abba's order has been completely compromised, and it's like, okay, I think I understand now why he considers that such an abomination, why he considers that, he actually says he hates it, and it's all by way of people pursuing worship, but it's mixed in with how the nations have worshiped their deities. And even though people say that they're worshiping the Most High, it's in the form of the mixture, which is what he actually says he hates. So it's full circle for me when you think of it with that visual.
Yeah. I like how you say that, once that mixture, and once the mixture happens, it's difficult to reverse it. In fact, you really can't reverse it, right? And ink and water, using this analogy, you can't reverse it. It's permanently colored. Well, there probably are some ways to do it, but it takes effort, right? But the other thing here is that analogy, that ink going into water, it also happens gradually until it becomes something different and new. And that's what's happened over time. These pagan observances have happened over time, and they become mixed So, that's why this statement here, modern religion says it's okay. Just honor him through it. Well, it's not okay. That's man's philosophy. That's man's theology. That's not Yahawah's. That's not Yahawah's command. Because what Torah tells us is don't add. It tells us that we're not to learn their way. It tells us essentially don't mix. And so that's where we get off track. If we start to mix. And Deuteronomy 12:1-4 tells us just that, these laws are that we're to guard the laws of Elohim, and that we are not to start observing the customs, traditions of those who are not Elohim, of the nations. It's telling us that. And so, and just like it said earlier in verse 4, it says, do not do so to Yahawah, your Elohim. In other words, don't insult him like that. Don't do it. And then in verse 5 of Deuteronomy 12, but seek the place which Yahawah, your Elohim, chooses out of all your tribes to put his name there for his dwelling place, and there you shall enter. So that's talking about the temple, right? But there's another passage that's in Jeremiah chapter 10, verse 2. And basically it's saying, don't learn the ways of the nations. And so Jeremiah 10:2, it says, thus said Yahawah, do not learn the way of the nations, and do not be awed by the signs of the heavens, for the nations are awed by them. So ask you guys a question. Why wouldn't we be awed by what we see in the Shamayim, in the heavens? Why shouldn't we be awed by that? And Jeremiah is saying, don't be. Yahawah is saying, don't be. Why wouldn't we?
I kind of compare it to, I was giving my son this analogy last night. It's kind of like, I know everybody on this call knows who Barry Sanders is, right?
Yeah.
Like, yeah. Zoe, you know Barry Sanders, Zoe?
Yeah, I'm a foreigner, but I ain't that much of a foreigner.
Okay, so let's go. So Barry Sanders, everybody knows, man, very incredible. So Barry Sanders, every time he got in the end zone, he just handed the ball to the ref, guys. He never did no backflips or no stanky legs, or he didn't do anything. He just scored a touchdown and literally just tossed the ball to the ref. And the reason why he did that is because he was born to be a running back. He was born to run. He was born to kick that football. He wasn't born to, but he just developed talent over the years. Anyways, so he got the ball. He can move. He can run. He can shake it and do all that. So it's a natural thing for him to score, to be in the end zone, right? So what I'm saying to your question, brother, for him to not, because it's like, because that's like a permanent, it's for us to experience. It's not a surprise, because that's something for us. So you shouldn't be in awe about something that is going to be yours. So that was kind of my response to that. That's all I got.
No, that's perfect. That's perfect, because that's what it's about. Why we're to understand his purpose for these luminaries, for the sun, the moon, the stars. That's for us to understand, and we're learning that. But it's not for us to go crazy about comets and constellations and that type of thing. That's what the nations do. We understand that they have a purpose. So we don't get planets and aligning and all of that stuff. We understand. I'm not even sure if planets are real, but anyway, we understand that Yahawah has placed these luminaries, sun, moon, and stars, in place for a reason. And he told us that right from the beginning. And so, yeah, mixture, it spreads slowly like ink in this water. And what it does, very quietly, is it shifts allegiance. It causes people to shift their allegiance to something and someone who is not Yahawah. And it happens over time. It's a huge shift in allegiance. Then as we wrap up, this is important to understand why all this is critical right now, because we are us. We're in the generation of calendar confusion. I mean, I don't know if the calendar has ever been as confused as it is today. Maybe it has, I don't know. We don't have that history, but it is so confusing now because it is so indoctrinated, the false calendars, the false time, the names that go with the calendars and the days, etc. So in Daniel 7, 23 through 25, it basically tells us that he will think about changing the times and laws. And who is he? Well, prophecy is very specific. In verse 23 of Daniel 7, this is what he said. The fourth beast is the fourth reign on earth, which is different from all other reigns, and it devours all the earth, tramples it down, and crushes it. So Zoe's probably tracking. I know he's done a lot of study on these beasts. In verse 24, and the 10 horns are 10 sovereigns or 10 kings from this reign, from these kingdoms. They shall rise, and another shall rise after them, and it is different from the first ones, and it humbles 3 sovereigns, and it spreads words against the Most High. Get that? It spreads words against the Most High. When we think about that, it doesn't have to be a direct words against the Most High. It's simply teaching something that is against him, something that's not his. That also spreads words against the Most High. And it wears out the set apart ones of the Most High. So that special nation, that chosen nation, all of this wears them out. And when you get worn out, you give up, you get worn down. And that's what's happened to Yahshua. And it intends to change appointed times. It being this kingdom, this sovereign kingdom, it intends to change the appointed times and law. And they are given into its hand for a time and times and half a time. So yeah, this whole idea that there is something, these sovereign nations, these kingdoms that are not Yahshua, they seek to change the time. They have changed the time. They have changed worship and what it means and when to do it. So if the clock is wrong, then the feast is wrong, right? If the worship is wrong, then what we see is the allegiance is wrong. So covenant requires alignment. It all has to work together. And that's why we have to return to creation's time, the time that creation has created. As we restore this, what Yahawah has put in place, we understand that sunrise is the beginning of a day. So sunrise-based days. That Ahbayaba is month 1. That Mawaidayama is the covenant anchor for appointed times. And we have to reject institutional time systems. We have to reject emotional attachment over obedience. We have to reject syncretism. So syncretism is mixing, all the mixing. And, I think it's great that, someone was mentioning this the other day, that in a church service, the person preaching uses the name Yahawah, or not Yahawah, but Yahuwah, mentions the name Yahuwah. That's great. It's a starting point. But you know what it also does? It creates a mixture. It's a mixture, trying to blend it in. But that service is of the nations. It's not what Yahawah created in his covenant and through Torah. It's a mixing. I know that's something harsh, and not necessarily intending it to be harsh, but to be direct. That's the language of our Father. He's direct. And that is a mixing. So it's great that there's a recognition, but recognition without obedience it amounts to nothing. Then finally, Joshua 24:15, you guys know this very well. As for me and my house, we have a choice how we lead our homes. That doesn't mean that everybody in our home aligns. It just means that we lead. We lead. We be the example. We're the example. We have to be consistent. That doesn't mean everyone's aligned. That doesn't mean that they won't ever be aligned. It just means that we lead. We set the example. We set the pace. And Ecclesiastes chapter 3 and verse 1, to everything there is a season. So everyone comes into the awakening in their own time, because everything happens in its own season. So bottom line, gentlemen, time belongs to Yahawah. And we have to either align with that time that he's created and from the very beginning, or we will drift. We'll drift away from what he has put in place.
So it's beautiful, man. I absolutely love the restoration and relearning, unlearning the foundational elements of all of this, and the importance of everything coming back to the covenant. I like how you said the covenant alignment, and the more we discuss it, the more it's starting to become natural, the more it's starting to become part of our nature. It's starting to make sense. It's starting to eliminate, for me personally, it's eliminating the previous way, because we're coming back to the original way.
I know for me, I was talking to my wife about this earlier today. It's like, we are in the truth now, and, we're getting the name right. We're getting the diet right. We're getting the Sabbath right. We're getting all this stuff correct, from our perspective and according to scriptures. But one of the things that I ran into is, even though we're in the truth, there's still people that are as well in the truth with us, but they have different biblical calendar dates.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? So they're saying, well, it's actually next week, or it's the week before. So that's kind of one of the things that kind of discouraged me personally, because, you got all these different people within the truth, and we still can't figure out the time. You know what I'm saying? So I know that's kind of what we're talking about now, but that's what I want to kind of add to try to figure it out so that we can nail something down and just start it, you know what I mean, and get it going. So that's my add to it.
And I like that, because what we have discovered is that, we complicate it because we try to use the equinox. Well, who created the equinox? Man created equinox. Or we try to use equilux. Who created equilux? Man created equilux. And if we just go back and just read, and you have to include Enoch. If you don't include Enoch and Jubilees, we'll never get it right. So once we do that, we realize what Enoch says: equal day, equal night. And it goes into the 9 parts. I tried to explain that a little bit earlier. But equal day, equal night is not equilux. Equilux is defined as something totally different. And equinox is defined as something totally different. Equal day, equal night is literal. It's a literal when there's, if we want to just say in hours, there's a literal even number of daylight versus an even amount of night. Exactly the same. And that's what throws everything off. The other thing is, and I've done this before, Yaz, So I completely understand what you're saying. Where I started is using calendars that were made by those who are not necessarily following the Enochian calendar. They're using, again, equilux, equinox. They're also maybe using the rabbinic teachings. So, Judaism, they have a different calendar. So all these different calendars out there. If we eliminate all these things that are not in scripture and just look at exactly and this is the simplicity of it. If we just look at what First Enoch says about equal day and equal night, we can find that. Even science helps us find that. We can actually go there. There are websites that will tell you, they won't say it like this. So you have to do a little bit of digging, but it'll tell you when there's equal light and equal day, when the days and night are equal. I haven't found a site that says it exactly like that, but what they do is they give you clues, and their clues are so close. And then when you actually do the actual additional calculations, you realize that, wow, this time hasn't changed. And that's what I discovered. That's the reason I feel 100% confident that March 18th of this year is the beginning of the Enochian Yahawah's calendar, because it starts on the right day of the month. It also starts the day after. We can literally calculate equal day and equal night. It's brilliant. It's simple and brilliant. But most people are not doing that yet. That doesn't mean they're not going to get there, because they probably will. But everyone starts with trying to figure this out and have the right day. The other thing, had a brother who was pretty emboldened to say that everything is based on a lunar cycle, not the sun. And that goes against everything. And they teach some great stuff. But on this one point, it doesn't align. And that's what we have to do. We have to align with what the scripture actually says. And he actually uses Genesis 1 to make that determination. But it's kind of like what we read earlier, y'all, as you read it, that cycle. He creates, and then he says there was evening and morning, third day, evening and morning, fourth day, etc. And what he's saying, once that morning completes, and we have to understand what morning is. In the scripture, morning means dawn. That's the terminology. It means dawn. And what dawn is, and you guys can look it up, what dawn is it's light, but the sun hasn't risen yet. And that's the key. When morning completes, that means the sun starts to rise. That means that previous day had just completed. The cycle is pretty clear. And so that's where everyone has to get to that. And I'm not saying that I'm absolutely 100% right, but I am pretty confident in the fact that we can see it in scripture. The scripture actually aligns to it. We have to take all of scripture into account. So not just fragments of it, but when we take everything into account, Enoch, Jubilees, it just aligns. It aligns so tight that it's hard to really go against it. But yeah, we all will get there.
I know